Okay, PTA Global Community, once again, it's my privilege to be in front of you, and we're going to continue on with our discussion on triangulation. And so today I'm going to be talking with Dr. Thompson, who's the owner of Thompson Fitness Solutions, and he's also chairman of the Exercise and Sports Science Department at the University of San Francisco, as well as a professor there. He's a PhD, and he does a lot of research in training older adults, falls preventions, and a lot of things. And I'm privileged to, one, know you as a friend and a colleague, and to also be a little teeny tiny bit part of some of the things you do, which has been a pleasure and a treat for me. What I want to do is, from your expertise in dealing with the older population, I want to extend upon what we talked about with Gary Gray and the Gray Institute, and how they kind of coined and brought the triangulation aspect, or the three dimension aspect, to our training principles. And I want you to expand for our viewers the importance of triangulation in working with the older adult population, and how it's so beneficial, and is it so beneficial, and the effects that it can really bring about for the older adult population, if you will.
That's a great question, Ronnie. Well, you know, when I think about this concept of triangulation, the first thing I think about is just triangles and the variety of triangles that we can look at. There's triangles that have various angles. You've got a right triangle that it's got a right angle at one of the angles on the three. You have your acute triangles where all of the angles are below 90 degrees. You've got an obtuse triangle where at least one of the angles of the triangle is greater than 90 degrees. So just the concept of a triangle kind of communicates variety. It communicates the need to be flexible with a lot of different elements. The length of the sides can be different. Whereas if we start looking at a shape that is more confined, let's say a square or a rectangle, well, the angles are fixed in a square and a rectangle. And all we can really do is manipulate the length of the sides, but even still, two of the sides always have to be the same length in order for that shape to be closed. Right. So just this concept of a triangle brings about the idea, or communicates this necessity for variety and flexibility. And ultimately, that's really what a person needs to be able to express to live one's life and live one's life successfully. So with older adults particularly, and due to some of the physical changes that take place with the aging process, particularly when we look at how the tissue structures change, and then the effect of those tissue structure changes on mobility at different joints, they start to lose their ability to have that breadth of different movement capacities to make them successful as they live. So instead of living life in a triangular fashion, or you might even think in a three-dimensional fashion, older adults sometimes and very often begin to live life in 2 dimensions, or live life in 1 dimension. And that really doesn't allow for someone to age what we would say successfully. So we need to train them in such a fashion so that they're able to regain what was lost. They once had the ability to triangulate movement, but perhaps due to disuse and tissue changes and injuries, they've gone from living a 3D lifestyle to kind of living a 2D or even a 1D lifestyle. And that's just not going to work for someone to get the most out of their life.
Do you feel that there's different responses? I know you talk a lot about the sensory responses and the kind of the sensory degradation that they get as a person gets older. How does that three-dimensional motion, or that triangular aspect of triangulation, how does that influence or benefit someone perhaps differently, more so than the traditional forms of training that we're typically doing, or we've kind of typically been trained and taught to do over time?
That's another good question. So, you know, the way that I look at it, when I see an older adult, say, come into our falls prevention exercise program, a project that I've been running now for over 3 years here in San Francisco. We turned out some peer-reviewed research at ACSM's national meeting this past June. We're working on some publications associated with this project. When I see older adults come in to talk to me who want to get into our program because they've either experienced a very recent fall, or they have serious concerns about their balance, they come to me, and immediately looking at them and looking at the way they move, it's pretty obvious that they've lost the capacity to move in all three planes of motion. They're very often very sagittal dominant. So the way I think of it is when an older person needs to go somewhere, they'll walk forward, they'll turn 90 degrees, and they'll walk the other direction. They no longer really have the capacity, particularly in the transverse plane, to rotate through their body. And a lot of that goes back to just the joint stiffness that begins to take place as a person gets older and they deposit more collagen, and the disuse of joints of the body result in such a reduction in movement capability. Take the subtalar joint. We should have a nice ability for sagittal movement for the talus on the calcaneus. We should be able to have some frontal movement, and we should be able to have transverse movement. Well, with an older person who's been very perhaps inactive for a long time, or an injury caused them to be immobilized for a while, now they've kind of lost a lot of their capability to move sagittally. They might not really have any frontal plane movement anymore, and the transverse plane movement is going to be very, very limited as well. So that lack of movement, number one of your examples that I always like, is looking at how the ankle can affect a person's ability to rotate the trunk. Mm-hmm. And if they don't have flexibility at the ankle, it's going to affect their capability to live in a three-dimensional environment and be successful in a three-dimensional environment. So when we look at these people that come to us, the first thing we think about is how do we enhance mobility at some of the important joints of the body that we need to have working well in order for them to express three-dimensional movement as they go through their life. So we might start with something as simple as an open chain, leg off the ground ankle circle, where you just have them mobilize that ankle, really focus and take their mental energy to get that ankle moving a little bit more. We might have them write their name or do the alphabet. And by doing that, we start to enhance a little bit of tissue mobility. We start to get a little bit more motion in all three planes. And then when we bring them to a standing exercise that integrates that movement, we add the effect of ground reaction, we add the effect of gravity, we're able to then have them transition that newfound mobility into a movement pattern that might have something that's helpful for them during the course of their lives. Perhaps it's a reaching task, and it's really nice to be able to know that somebody can go up on their tiptoes, rotate their body, and get something off the top shelf. Whereas if they didn't have that initial mobility and that triplanar motion, even at what we'd consider to be, relative to other joints of the body, a pretty small joint at the ankle, they can't express that in their life, and then they're not going to be really successful at being independent. And the thing that I'm most concerned about, they're not going to be real successful staying on their feet. They're probably going to experience another fall at some point.
Chris, thanks for your time. Thanks for answering some questions, because some of those things are really, really powerful and important for us as trainers, for our community as trainers. And you've actually created, now through the Thompson Fitness Solutions, is that you've created kind of a pathway or a means for people to get more and higher level education regarding the older adult population. Where can people go to access you to get some of this information, to start finding out how to get a little bit better, a little bit more in tune with some of the new information that's coming out, some of the latest stuff, and that's also peer-reviewed and researched, like people by yourself. So where can we go to find out information about you and what you have to offer?
Well, I would first recommend people go to my website, which is www.thompsonfitnesssolutions.com. There you can see the kind of work that I'm engaged in right now, both through my work at University of San Francisco and through my fitness consulting work. You'll be able to download things like my ACSM poster on falls prevention that I presented back at ACSM in June 2010 in Baltimore. You'll be able to access some of my other presentations that I've given at IDEA, at ACSM Health Fitness Summit, and some of the other conventions that I've presented at. Links to articles I've written for IDEA Fitness Magazine, for PT on the Net. So that's a really good spot to go and kind of see the sort of work that I do. Also see a couple of the products that we've got out there. We have a DVD. We also have a consulting opportunity to kind of inform people how to work most effectively with older adults who've been dealing with balance impairments.
Good.
And then in terms of kind of recent news, I do have a Twitter page where anytime I see something that's really interesting in older adult fitness, I tweet it.
Awesome.
I started in January, started this tweet thing. I actually really enjoy it because it's a great way to keep people current with issues dealing with older adults. So they can go to twitter.com, and then it would be /thefitnessprof. And then I've also got a blog at thefitnessprofessor.wordpress.com.
Okay.
And there I kind of have some of my own personal opinions and thoughts and insights that I put up there on about a twice monthly basis. So if you do a little looking around, you should find a lot of me out there.
Should have seen that go across on the screen here, so you'll have all those websites. Tons of information, so please access it. Thanks for your time, and I look forward to talking to you again. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Rodney. Take care, everybody.
Okay.